This is China's national anthem, March of the Volunteers. This rallying cry for 1.4 billion Chinese was born from a stirring chapter of the nation's collective memory, the charge of a group of volunteer fighters in northeast China against Japanese invaders in the early 1930s. These patriotic warriors, whose heroism was immortalized in the anthem's powerful verse, were among the first in the world to take up arms against fascist aggression, on the eve of what will later be known as the Second World War. As the Western powers reel from the shocks of the Great Depression, Japan launched a surprise attack on China on September 18, 1931. A sudden assault on Chinese garrisons in Shenyang was followed by the sweeping occupation of all of northeast China, a territory 3 times the size of Japan and home to 30 million Chinese. Japanese active aggression was only emboldened by the nationalist government's non-resistance policy and the feeble response from the League of Nations. For a moment, it seemed all was lost. It was in this darkest hour that the volunteer army rose to the occasion. Japan's advance in northeast China was met with grassroots resistance from force of workers, farmers, students, and Defying soldiers who refused to surrender without a fight. They were poorly armed, scarcely provisioned, yet unwavering in their will to die for their homeland. These ragtag band of patriots were later forged into a united force under the leadership of the Communist Party of China. Deep behind enemy lines, they fought under the harshest conditions. One of their top commanders, Yang Jingyu, held on until his final breath, surrounded by enemy troops, freezing winds, and utter starvation. Yet never once did he consider surrender. His sacrifice was modeled after, as the resistance in northeast China endured, unbroken, throughout the long and bitter 14-year struggle. March of the Volunteers was composed in 1935, when Japan was poised to push further south of the Great Wall, and what began as an invasion now awakened China to the looming threat of national extinction. For a song meant to inspire, the unyielding fighters in the northeast became a source of inspiration. Arise, all who refuse to be slaves. This soul-stirring oath sworn by recruits of the volunteer army was later turned into the opening line of today's national anthem.
东北抗日义勇军呢，他是率先拿起刀枪与日寇进行抵抗的队伍，反映了民众对朴素的爱国情感。那么新中国成立之后，最终选择将《义勇军进行曲》作为我们的国歌，召唤国人，不忘国耻。
As the theme song of a blockbuster patriotic film, March of the Volunteers soon found its way back to northeast China under Japanese occupation. And just like the volunteer fighters it honored, the song itself became a form of resistance through its very notes. As the occupation force sought to enslave both the bodies and minds of the Chinese, they waged a campaign to distort and reinvent national identity through colonial-style rituals, education, and music.
伪满洲国的奴化教育，就是对中华文明的传统文化进行毁灭性的阉割，在语言上，都要学日本语，尽量不说中国话，还有在音乐上，他们印了大量的音乐的课本，这里面全是日本歌曲，除了这些什么满洲姑娘啊，这个他们的民族的樱花啊，还有一系列的军国主义歌曲，来腐蚀我们孩子的心灵。
In the northeast city of Harbin, however, posters for a harmonica society quietly appeared at street corners. Beneath the pretense of music lessons, its members rehearsed patriotic tunes in secrecy before staging a 3-day concert at a local cinema. Among the performed melodies was March of the Volunteers. These players tried to resist through remembering, as the lyrics reminded a tearful and shivering audience that the Chinese nation now faces its greatest perils. The perils facing the nation soon reached a climax. On July the 7th, 1937, the Japanese army launched a surprise attack on Chinese troops around this bridge at the outskirts of today's Beijing. It ushered in a full-fledged invasion of China. The bridge that marked the outbreak of the war came to be known in the West as the Marco Polo Bridge, a name that echoes the earliest Western imaginations of China. Its construction dates back more than 8 centuries, when Beijing emerged as the national capital for the first time. In defense of the time-honored bridge and the ancient capital that stood behind it, the Chinese garrison scrambled to repel the invaders, even wielding broadswords and bayonet charges, until both the army's deputy commander and the divisional leader fell in battle.
如果说事变后全面的抗战，它意义呢是很大的。在全世界的法西斯水晶和让步的政治之下，中国人能够奋起来反抗日本的侵略，为全世界反法西斯人坚定了信心。
At that pivotal moment, Chinese from all walks of life fought to preserve the memory of the 5,000-year-old civilization in their own ways. 2 days before the July the 7th incident, a group of Chinese scholars made a groundbreaking discovery here that shattered Japan's exclusive claim to the architectural legacy of ancient China. The main hall of a Buddhist temple they helped bring to global attention was then the oldest known standing structure in China. First built in the mid-9th century and lost in historical prominence for 1,000 years. This landmark finding debunked the Japanese assertion that the architectural bloodline of China's Tang dynasty survives only in Japan.
日本人是吧，曾经就断言了，包括在联合国的发言上，包括在他的书上都说，中国是没有唐代建筑的。要想看这个唐代建筑，必须跑到他们东京、日本的这个京都跟奈良去。当时这个是没有硝烟的一场学术争论，是吧？学术战争，因为日本人不光要在武力上殖民的民，还要在文化上殖民的民。发现佛光寺以后，是当时发现的，中国最古老的建筑。直到今天，它依然是现存的3座唐代建筑中等级最高、体量最大、保存最完整的，一直被人们赞誉为中国古建第一瑰宝。
Liang Sichang, the leading scholar of this archaeological team, went on to compile a catalog documenting more than 400 invaluable cultural sites in China. He handed out to the warring parties in the hope of sparing these bearers of the nation's history from wartime destruction. During the entire war against Japanese aggression, China managed the largest evacuation of cultural relics in human history and safeguarded its intellectual lifeline through relocating top universities deep in Southwest mountains. The resistance lived on, not only through the barrel of a gun, but also through the preservation of cultural lineage. It was believed that losing either mortal flesh or their collective memory would spell the end of China as a nation, or as a civilization. The crown jewel of China's ancient architecture, discovered at the time of the Japanese full-scale invasion, soon found itself at the forefront of battle lines. Only 20 kilometers away from where it stood, the 8th Route Army, under the leadership of the Communist Party of China, established its first frontline headquarters to push against the Japanese. They would become the backbone of the nationwide resistance. It was an order issued from this command post that led to the first major victory for the Chinese forces. 2 months into Japan's all-out aggression, the 8th Route Army annihilated over 1,000 Japanese troops at a mountain pass along the Great Wall. This hard-fought triumph shattered the myth of Japanese invincibility and bolstered the nation's resolve to fight on. Leveraging its modernized military and industrialized economy, Japan's advance into a poor and rural China still seemed unstoppable. The nationalist government saw its armies broken, coastal regions fallen, and its capital city Nanjing captured and raped. It was under this circumstance that the forces led by the Communist Party of China went deep behind Japanese occupied lines and waged a prolonged war of resistance guided by Mao Zedong's doctrine of guerrilla warfare. Their operations tied down 60% of the invading Japanese and 95% of their puppet troops. It prompted the US President Franklin Roosevelt to reach the conclusion that without China, Japan and Nazi Germany would have easily cut through Eurasia with a giant pincer movement.
抗战爆发以后呢，有2大战场，一个是正面战场，一个敌后战场。作为共产党人领导的军队担负的这敌后战场，本来日本人准备以华制华，以战养战的，甚至把跟他的占领区变成向我们进攻的一个基地。敌后战场建立反而使他的这个基地成了他向前进攻的一个重大的一个累赘和推累。所以说，敌后战场是在抗日战争的后期失去了重要的战略支撑和战略地位的。
However, such an asymmetrical confrontation came at a staggering cost. Japan's military aggression and atrocities against civilians left 35 million Chinese dead or wounded, the highest human toll suffered by any nation involved in the Second World War. Among those who gave their lives was General Zuo Chuan, the Deputy Chief of Staff of the 8th Route Army. Before falling in the thick of the battle, the 37-year-old officer poured the love for his wife and only daughter in final letters.
老爷一共给自己的妻子、女儿写了12封信，最后一封家书，他是在老爷牺牲前3天写给自己妻子的。他这个家书里边，他写到说，就想象着吧，跟妻女在一起的这种其乐融融的这种幸福生活。说女儿一会儿爬到妈妈怀里，又转到爸爸怀里来，然后呢，一会儿爬到地上，闹个不休，真是痛快极了。特别是我母亲，82年才看到这些信，我的母亲才知道，哦，原来我父亲留了这么多信。但是从这些信里面，她第一次看到了父亲原来这么爱她。我在这个信里面看到老爷管自己的女儿叫小狗，就是咱们过去老人最传统的这种称呼孩子的这种，怎么说呢？虽说不好听，但是是他们最表达亲昵的这种最好的办法。我觉得他是一个前线将士最真实的这种感情，因为从这里我们能看到我们的军人、我们的将士，他们也都是有温柔的一面，有柔软的一面，他们跟我们一样都是普通的人。
Among China's over 2,800 county-level administrative regions, Zuochuan County is one of the few that still enjoys the privilege of bearing the name of an individual. It is the place where Zuochuan gave his life, and also a lasting symbol of countless war martyrs whose names shall never fade away. China's unwavering resistance despite huge sacrifice rekindled hope for those terrified by the looming darkness of fascism. Near a small town called Taiyuan at the heart of the Grand Canal, Chinese nationalist forces scored a rare and resounding victory that shattered Japan's illusion of a swift Chinese capitulation. The world press erupted in euphoria as the elimination of 10,000 Japanese troops in a single battle brought not only a tactical success, but also a timely morale boost for the entire anti-fascist camp. The legendary war photographer Robert Capa published images of this battle with a striking caption. To the names of small towns famous as turning points in history, Waterloo, Gettysburg, Verdun, and still another, it is Taiyuan. Half a century later, the commemoration of this battle will mark yet another turning point in history. It bears testimony to the fact that the joint struggle against Japanese aggression has left an indelible mark on the Chinese nation, on both sides of the Taiwan Strait. In the aftermath of the Second World War, China quickly plunged into a civil war between the two parties that had once fought side by side against Japanese aggression. As the Communist Party of China emerged victorious on the mainland, and the nationalist forces retreated to Taiwan, cross-strait hostility persisted throughout the Cold War, until a film about the Battle of Taiyuan unearthed a long buried chapter of their shared past.
我们在血战台庄的组织生产过程中，就得到了一个帽子，叫做国民党正面战场的第一部电影。 所以社会的关注就很大啊。血战台庄在台湾很快就传开了，好些报纸就公开报道，这个中央日报、联合报啊等报就公开报道，在大陆发行了一个国民党抗面正面战场打胜仗的血战台庄。86、87年那几年血战台庄的录影带，地下录影带就十分好笑，连报纸也纷纷登台庄的回忆录。当时刚通过了开放台胞回大陆探亲，尤其是当过兵的，回来就很容易。他们说我们是沾了血战台庄的光啊。
Just 1 year after the film's debut, the decades-long ban on family visits between the mainland and Taiwan was lifted. The erstwhile crucible of Taiwan later found itself the first official hub for cross-strait exchanges. It has since served as a reminder that people on both sides of the Taiwan Strait share the same ancestry, speak the same language, and once stood united against the same enemy. After half a century under the colonial yoke, Taiwan was restored to China following Japan's unconditional surrender in 1945. The island's return not only marked the nation's struggle against a century of humiliation, but also stood as a living proof of the integrity of the post-war international order. At the heart of this order is the United Nations. On June 26, 1945, a conference drawn by 50 nations in the anti-fascist camp adopted the Charter of the United Nations, with China, the first to resist aggression, being the first signatory. Dong Biwu, a founding member of the Communist Party of China, signed his name on this founding document of the United Nations as a member of the Chinese delegation. The war had claimed tens of millions of lives before such an organization dedicated to world peace was established. For 8 decades, the United Nations has helped spare humanity from another global conflict and has become an enduring part of mankind's collective memory of the heavy price paid for peace and prosperity.
As the nation that fought the longest and suffered the most, China has naturally become the stoutest defender of the post-war global order centered on the United Nations. It also remains committed to preserving an accurate account and correct historical understanding of that devastating and consequential war.
Even today, the memory of that war is still relevant, especially for a country marching on its path towards national rejuvenation, amid great changes unseen in a century unfolding across the world. The memory highlights a spirit, one of resistance, of perseverance, of sacrifice, of unity, and of the protection of humanity's shared values. 80 years on, the memory still rhymes.